In the heart of Portland's financial district, a bank heist unfolds with surgical precision. $2.3 million vanishes without a trace, security systems dismantled, and not a single clue left behind. The thieves seem to have thought of everything, except for one forgotten camera that would expose a betrayal no one saw coming. The morning fog still clung to Portland's financial district when Detective Sarah Chen's radio crackled to life at 9:47 a.m. Bank robbery at Portland First. National officer down, suspects fled the scene. As her unmarked sedan cut through the wet streets, Sarah couldn't have imagined that this call would unravel one of the most sophisticated criminal conspiracies in the city's history. The bank stood like a wounded giant on Morrison Street, its glass facade reflecting the flashing red and blue lights of a dozen patrol cars. Yellow crime scene tape fluttered in the October breeze, creating a barrier between the curious crowd of onlookers and what appeared to be the crime scene of the decade. Sarah stepped out of her car, her breath visible in the crisp morning air, and immediately sensed that this wasn't going to be an ordinary case. Inside the bank's marble lobby, chaos had been replaced by an eerie stillness. The scene told a story of military precision: no scattered papers, no signs of panic, no evidence of a rushed escape. Everything had been calculated, planned down to the smallest detail. The vault door stood, open like a mouth-frozen mid-scream, its sophisticated locking mechanism somehow bypassed without any apparent damage. Near the teller counter, paramedics worked on Marcus "Tank" Rodriguez, the bank's security guard. A former Marine with 20 years of experience, Tank was known for his vigilance and quick reflexes, yet here he lay unconscious, a single blow to the back of his head having dropped him like a stone. The precision of the attack suggested someone who knew exactly where to strike and how much force to use. Sarah knelt beside the fallen guard, studying his positioning. "How long has he been out?" she asked the lead paramedic, noting the professional way Tank had been incapacitated, enough to neutralize him without causing permanent damage. "At least 40 minutes, maybe longer. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Clean knockout, no excessive violence." The paramedic's words carried an undertone of professional respect for the attacker's skill, despite the criminal nature of the act. As Sarah walked through the bank, her trained eye catalogued every detail. The security cameras hung lifeless from their mounts, their cables cleanly severed with surgical precision. Not torn or yanked, but cut with deliberate care by someone who understood electronic systems intimately. The alarm system's control panel had been expertly disabled, its circuits bypassed so smoothly that it never triggered a signal to the monitoring company. $2.3 million in cash had vanished from the vault, but only cash. The safety deposit boxes remained untouched. Valuable documents lay undisturbed, and even the cash drawers at the teller stations held their usual amounts. This wasn't the work of desperate criminals or opportunistic thieves. This was a surgical strike with a specific target and a clear exit strategy. The time window had been perfect. The thieves had struck during the exact 47-minute gap between the armored car's departure and the next scheduled security check. They had known the bank's routines, the guards' patterns, and the security system's vulnerabilities with an intimacy that sent a chill down Sarah's spine. Standing in the violated vault, surrounded by empty cash drawers and the lingering scent of fear, Sarah realized she was looking at something unprecedented in her 15 years as a detective. This wasn't just a bank robbery. It was a masterpiece of criminal planning that left absolutely nothing to chance. Or so it seemed. Little did she know that even the most perfect crimes could be undone by the smallest oversights, and somewhere in this building, a forgotten eye had been watching. Detective Mike Harrison arrived 20 minutes after Sarah, his coffee still steaming in the Portland morning chill. A veteran investigator with graying temples and sharp instincts, Mike had been Sarah's partner for 3 years, and together they had built a reputation for solving the unsolvable. As he surveyed the crime scene, his expression mirrored Sarah's growing concern. This case would test every skill they had developed. The bank's manager, Victoria Sterling, waited nervously in her office, her usually perfect composure cracked by the morning's events. A woman in her late 40s with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, Victoria had managed Portland First National for 8 years without a single security incident. Her hands trembled slightly as she recounted the morning's timeline to the detectives. "I arrived at 7:30 as always," Victoria began, her voice steady despite her obvious distress. "Everything appeared normal during my initial walkthrough. The vault was secured, the alarm system showed green across all sectors, and Tank was at his usual post by the main entrance. She paused, collecting herself before continuing. The armored car pickup was scheduled for 8:15, routine Wednesday collection. That's when. They must have been watching. Sarah leaned forward, noting Victoria's intimate knowledge of the security protocols. Who else knew about the armored car schedule? The question hung in the air like morning fog, heavy with implication. The schedule is confidential, shared only with essential personnel. Myself, the head teller, Tank, and of course, the security company. Victoria's answer was precise, but Sarah caught the slight hesitation before she mentioned the security company. We also file reports with our insurance company and, well, there are regulatory requirements that involve law enforcement notifications. Mike exchanged a glance with Sarah. The circle of people with inside knowledge was wider than they had initially assumed, and each name would need thorough investigation. What about the security system? How many people have the override codes? Only 3 people have master access. Myself, the bank president, and the head of security at our corporate office. Victoria's confidence faltered slightly, but the system was installed 2 years ago by Apex Security Solutions. They would have the technical specifications, maintenance records. In the lobby, James Mitchell sat hunched over a cup of coffee, his business suit wrinkled and his face pale. A regular customer who had arrived just as the heist was concluding, James had found himself face to face with 3 masked figures exiting through the bank's rear service door. His hands shook as he described the encounter to Sarah. They moved like soldiers, James said, his voice barely above a whisper. Not running, not panicked, just purposeful, controlled. The one in front was tall, maybe 6'2", with broad shoulders. He looked right at me for a second and I swear I could see his eyes through the mask. Cold, calculating, like he was deciding whether I was a problem. Sarah pressed for more details. Did you notice anything distinctive about them? Clothing, mannerisms, anything that stood out? James closed his eyes, trying to retrieve every detail from his traumatized memory. The one in back was smaller, moved differently, lighter on his feet, almost graceful, and there was something about the middle one. He limped slightly, favoring his left leg. Not badly, just enough to notice if you were looking. Mike made careful notes as James continued his account. The description painted a picture of professionals, not the typical smash-and-grab amateurs they usually dealt with. These thieves had operated with military discipline and precision timing that spoke of extensive planning and inside intelligence. Dr. Elena Vasquez arrived as the afternoon shadows lengthened across the bank's floor. Portland's lead forensic analyst was known for finding evidence where others saw nothing. Her reputation built on 2 decades of turning impossible cases into courtroom victories. She moved through the crime scene with methodical precision, her trained eye cataloging details that others might miss. Interesting, Elena murmured as she examined the severed security camera cables. Clean cuts, professional tools, and look at this. She held up a small piece of plastic. They used cable ties to secure the loose wires. These weren't vandals or amateurs. They didn't want to damage anything unnecessarily. The forensic examination revealed more questions than answers. No fingerprints, no DNA evidence, no footprints that couldn't be attributed to bank employees or customers. The thieves had worn gloves, shoe covers, and had been careful not to touch any surfaces that might retain trace evidence. Even their entry and exit routes had been chosen to minimize contact with surfaces that could yield forensic clues. As the sun set over Portland's skyline, painting the bank's windows in shades of orange and red, Sarah stood in the empty lobby, trying to piece together the puzzle. Every lead seemed to evaporate under scrutiny. Every potential clue led to dead ends. The perfect crime appeared to be living up to its name, leaving her with nothing but questions and a growing sense that this case would haunt her dreams. 3 days into the investigation, Sarah found herself staring at the bank's architectural blueprints spread across her desk like a complex puzzle. The Portland Police Department's Detective Bureau hummed with its usual afternoon activity, but Sarah's focus remained laser-sharp on finding something everyone else had missed. Mike sat across from her, equally frustrated by their lack of progress. "I keep thinking about the precision," Sarah said, tracing her finger along the bank's floor plan. They knew exactly where every camera was positioned, exactly how long they had between security checks, exactly which vault contained the cash reserves. Her voice carried the weight of 3 sleepless nights spent reviewing evidence that led nowhere. Elena Vasquez appeared at Sarah's desk, carrying a thick folder of building schematics and security documentation. "I've been thinking the same thing," she said, settling into a chair. "But what if we're looking at this wrong? What if instead of asking how they knew so much, we should be asking what they didn't know?" The three investigators huddled around the blueprints as Elena pointed to various sections of the building. "Look here. The main security grid covers the lobby, the vault area, the teller stations, all the customer areas. But buildings this old, they've been renovated multiple times. Sometimes old systems get left behind." Sarah felt a spark of hope for the first time in days. "You're thinking there might be legacy security equipment?" "Exactly. When they upgraded to the digital system 2 years ago, they might have left some of the old analog cameras in place, especially in areas that weren't part of the main security concern." Elena pulled out a magnifying glass and began examining the building's original construction documents from 1987. The loading dock. Sarah's eyes fixed on the small rectangle at the building's rear corner, an area designed for deliveries and maintenance access. It was positioned perfectly to observe the service entrance the thieves had used, but it was separated from the main building by a service corridor that had been added during a 1995 renovation. "Elena, this loading dock area, would it have had its own security coverage originally?" Elena studied the documents more closely. "According to this, yes. The original installation included a camera mounted on the exterior wall, aimed at the service entrance. But look," she traced a line with her finger. "When they renovated and added the service corridor, the camera would have been repositioned. It might not have been integrated into the new digital system." Mike was already reaching for his coat. "We need to get back to the bank and check this out." The afternoon light was fading as the three investigators made their way through the bank's rear service area. The loading dock was a utilitarian space designed for function rather than form. Concrete floors, metal roll-up doors, and industrial lighting created an atmosphere far removed from the marble elegance of the bank's customer areas. Sarah spotted it first, a small weathered security camera mounted high on the exterior wall, its lens aimed directly at the service entrance. The camera was old, clearly from an earlier generation of surveillance equipment, and appeared to be completely independent of the main security system. "There," Sarah pointed upward. "That's got to be it." Elena examined the camera with her flashlight. "It's definitely operational. I can see the power cable running to the electrical box. And look at this." She followed the coaxial cable along the wall. "It's hardwired to a recording system, probably VHS or early digital. If we're lucky, it's been recording this whole time." The trail led them to a small utility room behind the loading dock, where they discovered an old security recording system that had been forgotten during the digital upgrade. The equipment was dusty but functional, its red recording light blinking steadily in the dim space. "Jackpot," Mike whispered, his voice tight with anticipation. Back at the police station, Elena worked her technical magic on the forgotten recording system. The footage was grainy, and the timestamp showed it hadn't been synchronized with the main security system, but it had been faithfully recording everything that happened in the loading dock area for the past 2 years. "Here we go," Elena said, fast-forwarding to the date of the robbery. 8:20 a.m. right in our window. The screen flickered with black and white images of the loading dock. At first, nothing seemed unusual, just the empty concrete space and the closed service entrance. Then, at 8:23 a.m., a figure appeared at the edge of the frame. Sarah leaned closer to the monitor. The image was fuzzy, but she could make out a person in dark clothing moving purposefully toward the service entrance. The figure carried what appeared to be electronic equipment and moved with confident familiarity around the loading dock area. "Can you enhance this?" Sarah asked, her pulse quickening. Elena's fingers flew across the keyboard, applying digital enhancement techniques to squeeze every detail from the old analog footage. Slowly, the image began to sharpen. The figure's movements became clearer, and then Sarah saw it, a distinctive tattoo on the person's left forearm, partially visible as they reached up to manipulate something near the service door. But it was the person's gait that made Sarah's blood run cold. She had seen that particular way of walking before, the slight favor of the left leg that James Mitchell had described. But more than that, she recognized something deeply familiar about the figure's posture and movement patterns. "Mike!" she called out, but when she turned around, her partner was nowhere to be seen. The detective bureau continued its evening routine around her, but Sarah felt suddenly isolated. staring at a piece of evidence that threatened to turn everything she thought she knew upside down. Elena continued working on the footage, unaware of Sarah's growing unease. "I'm getting better resolution on the tattoo. It looks like some kind of military insignia, maybe Marine Corps. And there's something else." She paused the footage and pointed to a reflection in the service door's window. "Look at this. There's another person, staying back in the shadows, but you can just make out..." The reflection was faint, but unmistakable. Sarah stared at the screen, her world tilting on its axis as she recognized not just one familiar figure, but two, the forgotten. Camera had indeed captured everything, but what it revealed was far more devastating than she could have imagined. The next morning arrived grey and cold, matching Sarah's mood as she sat in her car outside Tommy Ghost Sullivan's apartment building in southeast Portland. The tattoo from the footage had led them directly to Sullivan, a former Marine with a reputation for high-end burglaries and a distinctive eagle globe anchor tattoo on his left forearm. But as Sarah stared at the building, her mind kept returning to that second figure in the reflection, the one that made her question everything she thought she knew about this case. Mike arrived 15 minutes late, unusual for her typically punctual partner. His appearance was disheveled, his coffee-stained shirt telling a story of a difficult morning. "Sorry, traffic was brutal," he said, but Sarah noticed he avoided eye contact as they prepared to question Sullivan. The apartment building reeked of stale cigarettes and broken dreams. Sullivan lived on the third floor, and the climb up the narrow staircase gave Sarah time to study Mike's behavior. He seemed nervous, checking his phone repeatedly and jumping at every sound from the neighboring apartments. Tommy Ghost Sullivan opened his door before they could knock, as if he had been expecting them. A lean man in his 40s with prematurely grey hair and intelligent eyes, Sullivan carried himself with the controlled confidence of someone accustomed to dangerous situations. The Marine tattoo was clearly visible on his forearm, an exact match for the footage. "Detectives Chen and Harrison," Sullivan said calmly. "I wondered when you'd get around to me." Sarah studied Sullivan's face, looking for signs of guilt or deception. Instead, she found something unexpected, genuine confusion mixed with what appeared to be professional curiosity about their investigation. "We need to talk about Wednesday morning, Tommy. Specifically, your whereabouts between 8:15 and 9 a.m. Sullivan gestured them into his Spartan apartment, neat and organized with military precision. "Wednesday morning I was at the VA hospital for my physical therapy appointment. Got there at 7:45, didn't leave until 10:30. You can check with Dr. Martinez if you want." Mike shifted uncomfortably as Sarah made notes. "Physical therapy for what?" she asked. "Left knee, courtesy of an IED in Fallujah. Shattered the kneecap, screwed, up the ligaments. I walk with a slight limp now, especially in cold weather." Sullivan's matter-of-fact tone carried the weight of someone who had accepted his limitations long ago. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with Portland's October weather. The limp matched the footage perfectly, but Sullivan's alibi sounded legitimate. More troubling was the growing certainty that the second figure in the reflection looked increasingly familiar with each passing hour. "Tommy, we have surveillance footage showing someone with your tattoo at the bank during the robbery. Someone who moves exactly like you do." Sullivan's expression hardened. "Then someone's setting me up, detective, because I was getting my knee worked on while somebody was robbing banks." He pulled out his phone and showed them a calendar appointment. "Look, here's the confirmation. Physical therapy, every Wednesday at 7:45 a.m. for the past 6 months." As they left Sullivan's apartment, Mike seemed eager to move on to other leads. "His alibi will probably check out," he said, but Sarah detected something forced in his casual tone. "Maybe we should focus on the other evidence, see if we can find different angles." But Sarah couldn't let it go. Back at the station, she called the VA hospital and confirmed Sullivan's story in meticulous detail. Dr. Martinez remembered the appointment clearly. Sullivan had been there for the full session, working on range of motion exercises for his damaged knee. Security footage from the hospital confirmed his presence during the exact time of the bank robbery. The evidence was becoming contradictory in ways that made Sarah's detective instincts scream warnings. Someone with Sullivan's exact physical characteristics and distinctive tattoo had been at the bank, but Sullivan himself had an ironclad alibi. The only explanations were either an incredible coincidence or someone with intimate knowledge of Sullivan's appearance and mannerisms. Eleanor's voice crackled over the phone as Sarah sat at her desk, staring at the enhanced footage for the 100th time. "Sarah, I've been working on that reflection in the service door. I think I can get better definition on the second figure. What do you have? Give me another hour with the digital enhancement software. The reflection is tricky, but there's definitely someone else there, someone who stayed back while the person with the tattoo did the technical work. Sarah hung up the phone and looked around the detective bureau. Mike was at his desk, typing reports with unusual intensity. Captain Kane was in his office, door closed, speaking quietly on the phone. The afternoon shift was settling into their routine, but Sarah felt like she was seeing everything through different eyes. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or you'll find things you don't want to know." Sarah stared at the message, her blood turning to ice. Someone was watching her investigation, someone who knew she was getting close to dangerous territory. The forgotten camera had captured more than just evidence of the robbery. It had recorded a conspiracy that reached into places she had never suspected. As the shadows lengthened across her desk, Sarah realized that solving this case might cost her more than she was prepared to pay. The perfect crime was beginning to unravel, but the threads led directly into the heart of the institution she had sworn to serve and protect. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and the game was far from over. Eleanor's call came at 11:47 p.m., jolting Sarah from a restless sleep. "Sarah, you need to get down here right now. I've enhanced that reflection, and you're not going to believe what I found." The police station felt different at midnight, emptier, more hollow, with shadows that seemed to hold secrets. Sarah's footsteps echoed through the deserted corridors as she made her way to Elena's forensic lab, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Elena was hunched over her computer, her face illuminated by the glow of multiple monitors displaying various angles and enhancements of the forgotten camera footage. She looked up as Sarah entered, her expression grave. "I've been working on this for 8 hours straight, using every enhancement technique I know," Elena said, her voice tight with exhaustion and something else, fear. The reflection in the service door window. "Sarah, it's clear enough now to make a positive identification." Sarah approached the monitor, steeling herself for what she might see. Elena clicked play, and the enhanced footage began rolling. The figure with the tattoo moved through the frame exactly as before, but now the reflection in the service door window was crystal clear. Standing in the shadows, partially concealed but unmistakably present, was Detective Mike Harrison. Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. 3 years of partnership, hundreds of cases solved together, countless hours of trust and mutual respect, all of it crumbling in the space of a single heartbeat. "Are you absolutely certain?" Facial recognition software confirms 97.6% probability match. Height, build, posture, even the way he holds his left shoulder slightly higher than his right. It's all there. Elena's voice was barely above a whisper. "Sarah, there's more." Elena switched to another monitor showing timestamp analysis. "I've been correlating the footage with our case timeline. Mike arrived at the scene 20 minutes after you, remember? But according to this footage, he was at the bank at 8:23 a.m., 13 minutes before the robbery was even reported." The implications hit Sarah like physical blows. Mike hadn't been responding to the call. He had been part of the plan. Every question he had asked, every lead he had suggested, every moment of apparent confusion and frustration had been an elaborate performance designed to misdirect the investigation. "The person with the tattoo," Sarah said, her voice hollow. "If it's not Sullivan, I've been thinking about that too. Someone wanted us to focus on Sullivan, someone who knew about his tattoo, his limp, his criminal background. But look at this." Eleanor zoomed in on the tattoo in the footage. "It's too perfect, too clear. I think it's fake, a temporary tattoo designed to implicate Sullivan." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. Mike had access to Sullivan's file, knew about his physical characteristics and criminal history. He had been the one to suggest focusing on Sullivan when other leads dried up. He had been playing both sides of the investigation from the beginning. "Eleanor, I need you to lock down this evidence immediately. Don't show it to anyone else. Don't discuss it with anyone. Can you make copies and secure them? Off-site." "Already done. I've got copies at 3 different locations and I've documented the chain of custody meticulously." Eleanor's voice carried the weight of someone who understood the gravity of what they had discovered. "Sarah, if Mike is involved, who else might be? How deep does this go?" The question haunted Sarah as she drove through Portland's empty streets, her mind churning through every interaction she had had with Mike over the past 3 years. How many cases had been compromised? How many criminals had walked free because of inside information? How many victims had been denied justice? Her phone rang at 1:23 a.m. Mike's name appeared on the caller ID. "Sarah, where are you? I've been trying to reach you." His voice sounded normal, concerned, exactly like the partner she thought she knew. "Just following up on some leads." "What's up?" "I think we might have a breakthrough on the Sullivan angle. Can you meet me at the bank in an hour? I want to walk through the scene again with fresh eyes." Sarah's blood ran cold. The bank at 2:30 in the morning, just hours after she had discovered evidence of his betrayal. It wasn't a coincidence. "Sure, Mike, I'll be there." Sarah drove to the bank, but instead of entering, she positioned herself across the street with a clear view of the building. At exactly 2:30 a.m., Mike's car pulled up to the service entrance. He got out, looked around nervously, then entered the building using what appeared to be a security code. 20 minutes later, another car arrived. Sarah used her phone to zoom in on the license plate as a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Tommy Sullivan, not the real one, but someone wearing a Sullivan mask and carrying equipment that looked suspiciously like evidence bags. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Mike wasn't just covering up the robbery, he was actively planting evidence to frame Sullivan, ensuring that when the case went to trial, the real perpetrators would walk free while an innocent man took the fall. Sarah called Elena. "I need backup, but not through dispatch. Can you reach Detective Morrison from the state police? Tell him it's urgent and involves police corruption." As she waited for backup, Sarah watched Mike and his accomplice work methodically through the bank, planting evidence and manipulating the crime scene. The perfect robbery was about to become the perfect frame-up, orchestrated by someone with complete access to the investigation and unlimited opportunity to manipulate the evidence. When State Police Detective Morrison arrived 30 minutes later, Sarah had documented everything with her phone camera. The arrest went smoothly. Mike was so focused on his evidence planting that he never saw the backup units surrounding the building. As Mike was led away in handcuffs, he looked directly at Sarah with an expression of such cold calculation that she realized she had never really known him at all. The man she had trusted with her life was a stranger, a professional criminal who had infiltrated the police department for purposes she was only beginning to understand. But even as Mike disappeared into the back of the patrol car, Sarah knew this was far from over. The fake tattoo, the elaborate framing of Sullivan, the sophisticated robbery itself, all of it spoke to a level of organization and resources that went far beyond a single corrupt detective. The forgotten camera had exposed one betrayal, but Sarah suspected it was merely the tip of a much larger iceberg. The interrogation room at the state police facility felt colder than Portland's October morning as Sarah sat across from Mike Harrison, studying the face of a man she thought she had known. 12 hours had passed since his arrest, and Mike had maintained his silence, waiting for his lawyer with the patience of someone who understood the system intimately. Detective Morrison stood behind Sarah, his presence a reminder that this case had moved beyond the Portland Police Department's jurisdiction. Internal Affairs would conduct their own investigation, but the criminal charges would be handled by the state to avoid any appearance of conflict of interest. "The footage is pretty clear, Mike," Sarah said, sliding enhanced photographs across the metal table. "You at the bank before the robbery, planting equipment, coordinating. With the thieves, Tommy Sullivan's alibi checked out perfectly, just like you knew it would when you chose him as your patsy." Mike's lawyer, a sharp-dressed man named Crawford, leaned forward. "My client has no comment at this time," but Mike waved him off, meeting Sarah's eyes for the first time since his arrest. "You always were too smart for your own good, Chen. I told them you'd figure it out eventually, but they thought we had more time." "They?" Sarah's pulse quickened. "Who else is involved in this, Mike? You think this was just me? A $2 million operation with inside police intelligence, sophisticated equipment, military precision timing?" Mike laughed bitterly. "I'm just the inside man. The real architects of this operation are way above my pay grade." Detective Morrison stepped forward. "Give us names, Mike. Cooperation might help when this goes to trial." Mike's expression hardened. "You think I'm stupid? The people behind this don't leave. At loose ends. I'm already a dead man walking. The only question is whether it happens in prison or on the street." Sarah felt a chill as the implications sank in. Mike wasn't just a corrupt cop. He was a small part of a larger criminal organization that had infiltrated law enforcement. "How long has this been going on? How many other cases were compromised?" "Longer than you think, deeper than you can imagine." Mike's voice carried a note of resignation. "That forgotten camera of It might have caught me, but it also caught something else, didn't it? Someone else who was there. Someone you haven't figured out yet. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Elena had been so focused on identifying Mike in the reflection that they hadn't fully analyzed all the footage. What are you talking about? Mike smiled coldly. Check the timestamp again, Chen. 8:19 a.m., 4 minutes before I arrived to plant the equipment. There's another figure in that footage. Someone who was there first. Someone who coordinated the whole operation. Elena's voice crackled through Sarah's earpiece. She had been monitoring the interrogation from the technical booth. Sarah, I'm reviewing the footage now. He's right. There's an earlier timestamp showing another person entering the service area. The interrogation was suspended as Sarah and Morrison rushed to the technical booth. Elena had the enhanced footage queued up, showing the loading dock area 4 minutes before. Mike's appearance. A figure in dark clothing moved purposefully through the frame, but this person's movements were different, more authoritative, clearly in command. Can you get facial recognition on this one? Morrison asked. Eleanor worked frantically with the enhancement software. The angle is difficult, but oh my God. Her face went pale as the computer completed its analysis. Sarah, it's Captain Kane. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Captain Robert Kane, the man who had assigned Sarah to the case, who had been briefed on every development, who had access to all the evidence and all the investigative reports. He hadn't just been following the case, he had been orchestrating it from the beginning. Morrison was already on his radio, coordinating Kane's arrest, when Elena noticed something else in the footage. Wait, there's more. Look at this timestamp. 8:47 a.m., right after the robbery. The screen showed Kane returning to the loading dock, but he wasn't alone. Tommy Sullivan, the real Tommy Sullivan, was with him, very much alive and apparently unharmed. They never intended to frame Sullivan, Sarah realized, the full scope of the conspiracy finally becoming clear. They were going to kill him and make it look like he died in a shootout with police. Kane would have been the hero who tracked down the bank robber, and all the evidence would have died with Sullivan. The forgotten camera had captured not just a bank robbery, but a murder plot that would have eliminated the only person who could identify the real perpetrators. Kane's network of corrupt officers would have closed ranks. The case would have been declared solved, and the conspiracy would have continued operating with complete impunity. As state police units surrounded Kane's house, Sarah stood in the technical booth staring at the footage that had changed everything. One forgotten camera, overlooked in the rush to modernize that bank's security system, had brought down a corruption network that had been operating for years. But even as Kane was led away in handcuffs, Sarah knew this was only the beginning. The investigation would expand, revealing the full scope of the conspiracy and the damage it had caused to countless cases and victims. The perfect crime had indeed been undone by the smallest oversight, but the real mystery was how many other perfect crimes had succeeded because there had been no forgotten cameras to expose the truth. Portland's police department would never be the same, and Sarah realized that sometimes the most dangerous criminals were the ones wearing badges, sworn to protect and serve while betraying everything those words were supposed to mean.